Good morning, you wonderful lot. How's everyone doing? Especially with the looming results of the US election. Let me know in the comments. I've been following this quite closely. It is really interesting to me. Exciting times. So today marks day 7 of lockdown, which means I am day 5 into my pajamas. Just to address one comment that I had, and it was only one. This isn't a gimmick. This is genuinely how I spend a lot of my time. So today I've got a bit of a lazy video for you on my part, because the lockdown is quite strict. It's much stricter this time around because not a lot of people were respecting it last time. So it is quite difficult for me. I say quite difficult, it's nigh on impossible for me to be able to take my cameras or my drones anywhere, because if you do go out of your house, it's to either buy food, your 1 hour of exercise time, or for a medical appointment. And I can't really justify it as exercise because, well, I suppose I could, because I'd be lugging a big heavy thing around. I could say it's I'm lifting weights or something, but no. So instead what I've decided to do is give you all a bit more of an insight into my life in France, with a list of the things that I love about being in France, and a list of the things that either I don't particularly like or the things that I particularly miss about the UK. So you'll see that some of the negatives on this list are nitpicky, because I'd love living here. I've got no plans to move back to the UK unless we won the lottery and money was no object. So let's just dive right in, shall we? Number 1, we'll start with the good stuff and we'll end with the good stuff. We'll do a good stuff sandwich. Number 1 for things that I love about France is the pace of life over here. Moving to France from London and seeing that it's okay to take your time with life. You don't have to rush to work every single day. You don't have to stress out about train times or worry about huge crowds on your commute. It was a huge eye-opener and quite a relief, really, because I was only 25? How old am I? I may have been 26 when we moved here. And like I say, moving from the crowds and the hustle and bustle of London to this really calm, serene country where people actually know what it means to take a breath and relax and have a good time was, well, it was life-changing, really. So sort of on the flip side of that, and number 1 of the things that I don't like so much about living in France is everything closes really early. So in England, for instance, let's say I would come home from work at, say, 10 p.m. and have nothing in the fridge. It was okay for me to walk around to the nearest supermarket, because 24-hour supermarkets don't exist in France. I don't know if it is the law that it sort of falls into exploitation in France. That's a big thing about exploiting the workforce. But it was easy for me to go and get a loaf of bread and some jam from the local supermarket, 24 hours a day. But in France, everything closes around 7, and if it's not 7 in the bigger towns and cities, it may be 8 o'clock if you're lucky. So that is the number 1 thing that I don't like about living here. It's not a big deal, you adjust, but there are times when it would be really convenient to have a supermarket that's open past 8 o'clock. Okay, number 2 on the thing that I love about living in France is the food, as you can probably tell just by looking at me. In particular, the cheese. I was never a big cheese eater in the UK. I wouldn't mind the odd mature English cheddar every now and again, but it certainly wasn't a common thing for me to eat. But now in France, where the supermarkets have entire aisles and fridges 8 feet high, full of every type of cheese you can imagine, I could eat cheese until the cows come home. And then I would milk those cows and make more cheese. Number 2 on the list of things that I don't like. This is probably the biggest shock that I got when we first moved here, and that is customer service. Customer service in France is, I don't want to say it's terrible because it's not necessarily, but compared to other countries that I've been to, certainly compared to America, it is so bad. The first time I had experience with poor customer service in France was we'd lived here for maybe 6 weeks, and we were painting our first house, and we just went to the local supermarket to get the paint because it was a standard what we call premier prix, like a cheap. It was cheap paint basically, but it was fine for what we wanted. And we took 2 tins of this paint, and we used one of them, got halfway through the wall, opened the second tin, and it wasn't the same color as the first one. And we were there thinking, well, this obviously isn't right. I looked at the tins, they were labeled the same, we picked them from the same row of paints. So we took them back to the supermarket, and we said, these paints are different colors, basically. And the woman's response was, never mind, just go and buy another one. And that, to me, if that had happened in England, if you'd been to if you'd gone to the supermarket or a hardware store to buy paint and you got 2 different colors, what would happen is they would refund you the cost of both and give you a full one for free. That's sort of the standard practice in England if something goes wrong. They refund you and they give you one for free. But in France, it was, well, never mind, go and buy another one. And it took about 20 minutes of arguing before they just offered to refund the one that was a different color. So that was my first experience with bad customer service. And yeah, bars and restaurants are generally quite good, but supermarkets and like customer support, like if something went wrong with your phone and you called or your car, it's not great. And I do have a theory about this, which I suppose you have to admire France for it, is the job security over here, which we learned, I don't want to say the hard way because we didn't really learn it the hard way, it's just something that we found out through having our own business. Job security in France is so good, is so high, that in order to get rid of someone, if you wanted to sack or fire someone, you would have to catch them stealing. It would have to be a gross misconduct, and not necessarily being super friendly to your clients doesn't count. So you could maybe get away with giving someone a warning for how they speak to customers, but you need 4 or 5 of them to result in a dismissal. So I think job security is so good, and maybe people take it for granted, so they feel like they don't have to be overly friendly. But it is just a theory, I may be wrong. Okay, moving on. Number 3 of stuff I like about France is the French countryside. France has a really similar population to the UK, considering how much bigger it is, means that there's, emptiness isn't the right word. There's just a lot of land that isn't built on, and it's really calm and serene. And you can drive for hours and not come across another car. Traffic jams outside of big cities are very rare. And I never used to get out of the car to take photos of a sunset over the English countryside, but I will do that quite often in France because it is just that picturesque. So on that note, number 3 of the things that I really don't like in France is the photography law. In England, if you're in public, you can take a photo of anything or anyone that you want, and that does include young children. Not that I ever went there, but you are protected by the law for street photography in England. You can make a photo of anything you want as long as you're on public land. In France, that is not the case. If I were to go out into the high street in town and take photos of people, not just like architecture and flowers and whatnot, if I were to take a photo of somebody without their permission and post it online, I could be fined up to 40,000 euros maximum. So that was a strange one for me to learn, but I mean, I didn't learn it the hard way. I did look it up because you can't be too careful with things like that with people's privacy. So number 4 on the list of things I love is being a tourist in France. I also love being a tourist in England. Still, if we ever go to London, I try my hardest to have a day of being a tourist, to go and see all the sights and the attractions. But in France, it's all, not all, but in France, a lot of it is still very new to me. Days out in Paris when the sun is shining, I will go and see the Eiffel Tower. I will go to Notre Dame and Champs-Élysées. I'll go to Arc de Triomphe, and I will make a day of it, and I love it. That's a great day out for me, is just days being a tourist. And there's a lot to see in France. There's a plethora of beautiful palaces and chateaux and countrysides and rivers and lakes and the whole lot. And number 4 on the list of things that I don't like is how expensive everything is, and hand in hand with that is the tax system in France. France is the most taxed country in the EU. And that's something we found out very quickly, because business rates, employment rates and insurance are really, really huge. The first time we employed somebody, we were informed by our accountant that, I'll put it all into simple terms just for the sake of this video. We employed our chef when we had the restaurant. We were informed by our accountant that if we were to pay her 1,500 euros a month, we would also have to pay through taxes, social security and insurance the same amount to the state. So basically the rule is, if you can afford to pay one person, you can afford to pay 2 people, which is ludicrous if you if you think about it. But that is the law. It's the same for everybody. So just have to take it if you want to do it. It's the cost of doing business. So with everything being expensive, what a lot of people will do, particularly English people, they'll retire early at like 45 or 50, sell their house and move to France, because this is actually on my list of things I like. Land and house prices are really cheap here. So your money for a house will go up maybe 2 or 3 times as far as it would in England, but everything else is really expensive. Your food is expensive, fuel is expensive, the cost of a used car is just beyond ridiculous. The used car market in France is about 4 times as expensive as it is in England. And I think, again, that goes to French people don't trade in or change their cars very often, whereas in England it's very easy to lease a car, and every 4 years or 3 years, whatever the lease is, you trade it and you get a new car. So there's a lot of used cars on the market, so the price is quite low. So a lot of people will sell their house, they'll move here and not realize just how expensive everything else is, and then they'll have to start working again in a country where they may not necessarily speak the language, because they haven't taken into account just how expensive living here is. Yes, it's cheap to buy a house, but everything else outside of that is quite expensive. And the next thing on the list of things that I love about France ties into that last one, is just how cheap land and houses are. This whole place with all the buildings and all the land, oh, you know what, I don't care, I'll just tell you. Our whole place with all the land, the buildings, this huge convent was, if memory serves, it was either 412,000 or 417,000. If we were to buy something similar in England, we'd be looking at over £1 million on a bad day. So that is the main reason that people will sell up and move here, because for the cost of a shed in England, you can have a palace in France. The next thing on the list, this isn't something I don't like about France, this is just something that I particularly miss about England, and that is the pubs. Man, do I miss English pubs. I remember, I think it may have been like the second or third time we went back to England after moving here. We were in London, and we're not big drinkers. We're not big drinkers most of the time anyway, so it's not very common for us to go to a pub. But that one night we were going to see a show, I think it was Aladdin, but well, whatever, that's not important. We went into a typical English pub, and just from the moment I sat down, even the smell of that pub made me miss it more than I even realised. The main drink in England that I'll always go for is gin and tonic. It is very hard to get a decent gin and tonic in France. Maybe not in France, but I can't get a decent gin and tonic where I live. So I do miss that, but it's part of living here. And it's not like I can't just go online or whenever I'm at an airport, pick up some decent gin. And the next thing on the list of things that I love about France is the wine. Everybody knows that French is known for its wine, but I was never a big wine drinker in the UK. I had wine very rarely because I got particularly hungover on... it was my own fault, I was mixing beer and wine, but from then on, I didn't drink wine very much. But then coming to France, where if you were to buy a £4 bottle of wine in England versus a €4 bottle of wine in France, the difference is night and day. There's a lot more love that goes into the wine in France, which makes it much more pleasant to drink. Some of it, it's like Ribena, it's really dangerous drinking, but it is delicious. To get the equivalent taste and quality of wine in England, you're looking at maybe double or triple the price that you would pay in France. So that's definitely a plus in my book. The next thing that I don't like about France, well, no, not that I don't like about France, that I miss about England is gambling. I used to love a gamble. It's sort of baked into the nightlife culture of England, because you can go into a pub in England and you can have 3 or 4 fruit machines. You can have different places, different pubs that will set up a poker night once a week. But in France, you cannot gamble legally outside of a casino. Sort of one sort of asterisk there are specific shops that will allow you to bet on the horses, but that's it. You can't go to a pub and play a fruit machine. You can't go to a pub and set up a poker game. So it's not a huge deal. It's probably better for me that if ever we do want to go out and have a little gamble, it's a 40-minute drive to the nearest casino, and who's gonna go that far to waste some money? And the last thing on the list of things that I love about France is the language and the people. That's a double barrel, because obviously without the language I wouldn't be talking to the people. French people have a reputation in England for being lazy and rude and not liking English people very much, but that has not been my experience of living here. There is one instance where I had, the French people don't like English people moment, and it was one person, one time. We had just opened the restaurant and we put our menu outside in the display box, and there was a lady there looking at the menu, French lady. Carol went out to speak to her in French, obviously, and she just said, hi, how are you? She's like, I'm just looking at your menu. And then Carol said, would you like to book a table? And her response was, I heard your husband was English, so I will never come here. Right? And that says more about that one person than it does about the French population. And to be honest, I'm glad she never came in, because who wants to deal with people like that? The language side of French was the only thing I was ever any good at school. It was the only thing I paid attention to. But even with that, the French you learn in school is not the French that people speak. So I moved out here with a huge amount of arrogance, saying like, yeah, I got the highest marks possible in all my French exams. And then I moved out here to live, and I could barely get by. Because there's a lot of slang, and the language that you learn in school is, particularly my school was the French that they were still teaching like 100 years ago, so it just changed. But I I had a good base of French. The grammar was fine. The only thing that I sort of, on the odd occasion, still struggle with is everything in France, everything in the French language has a gender. So there'll be the odd time when I'll say le table and not la table because for some reason a table is a lady. But I do love the French language. I do like speaking it. And I've honestly, I am going to say that all of my interaction with French people is positive. They're very patient with me when I try to string my sentence together in my head before I say it. They're not rude if I make a mistake. Some people will either let it go because they know what you mean, or they'll just correct that one little mistake that you make. And that, to me, isn't indicative? Yeah. That, to me, is not indicative of a rude or lazy population. So I do love living here. Like I said, I've got no plans to move back to the UK. As much as we enjoy visiting it, it's one thing to visit it, but it's another thing to live there. And, it's nice that when we do go there, we can leave. That will do me for this video. There's not much more I can do. I do apologize for the low production value of this video, but there's not much more I can do because I can't go anywhere. Good luck to my friends in America with the pending election. I will be watching it along with you, no doubt. To everyone in the UK, have a safe and as happy as possible lockdown. I don't know when I'll be able to make another video, so this may be the last one for a little while. But I hope you enjoyed it and it gives you a bit of a distraction from everything that's going on. So take care of yourselves, stay safe. I'll see you when I see you. Love you lots. Bye.